Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kelly Warner, and I'm the director of Celt. And today we're going to talk about online pedagogy and specifically how and why to give feedback to your students. So let's go ahead and get started. So thank you again for joining us. Again, today we're going to be talking about online pedagogy and specifically how and why to give feedback. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, I wanted to tell you guys just a brief story about one of my ultimate Pinterest fails. So I don't know if you've seen these online before or not, but there are recipes where you can make what would seem to be delicious cakes within a coffee mug in your microwave. So one night when I was home by myself, I decided that I wanted to go ahead and try out one of these recipes that I found online. So I went to the website. The blogger made just this beautiful blog with all these pictures and instructions on how to make this lovely chocolate cake in a coffee mug right in your microwave. So I went through, I followed all of the instructions perfectly, measured everything out, and the last step was putting the cake in your microwave for just a couple of minutes so that it can cook and be delicious. So I went ahead, I put it in my microwave, but when I took it out, it just didn't look right. It didn't look like it was fully cooked. It just looked really soft. So I decided I'll go ahead and put it in for another couple of minutes. I took it out again. It just still wasn't looking right to me. So I decided I'll put it in for yet another couple of minutes. Needless to say, I didn't realize that since the coffee mug was ceramic and I was making it in the microwave, that it was cooking it from the inside out. So by the time I took the cake out of the microwave for the last time, it was just burnt and disgusting, and my whole house smelled like burnt butter for days. It was just terrible. And I was thinking about how this story relates to feedback. And you may be wondering this as well. But what I was thinking is, why did I fail when I tried to make this simple chocolate cake? The blogger, she set out just this beautiful blog with instructions and pictures on what exactly I was supposed to do. Yet I totally missed the mark and I totally failed at making a chocolate cake in my microwave. And the reason that I failed was because I didn't have any feedback from the instructor or the blogger in this instance. When I was trying to make this cake, I was just trying to figure it out on my own based off of what she had given me. But I couldn't ask her, hey, this doesn't look right. Do you think I should do it for a couple more minutes? I just kind of had to figure it out on my own. And I was thinking that some online students, they would feel this way as well if they weren't receiving feedback from the instructor regularly. So this is kind of what I want for us to be talking about today, how we can prevent our students from experiencing this frustration and ultimately failure due to a lack of feedback and communication. Because when it comes down to it, you can make just a beautiful Moodle course page for your online class, but if you're not giving feedback and having that two-way interaction and communication with your students, the amount of learning is going to be stifled, and really what your students can get out of your course is going to be limited. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and progress through this presentation. So for our agenda for today, I first want for us to identify 3 different types of assessment. Secondly, defining feedback and its function within the learning environment. So why is feedback important in the first place? Also, understanding why giving feedback is important for student success. And lastly, exploring different ways that we can give students feedback. I also want to show you this chart that I made, just really showing you the relationship between your assessments, feedback, and achievement, as well as our institutional learning outcomes, program learning outcomes, and course learning outcomes. Really, we need for all of these key components to work together in order for you to have a successful online course and for your students to experience success as well. So we're going to focus on the right half of this chart today. We're going to be looking at assessment, feedback, and achievement. I think that the other parts, the ILO, PLOs, and CLOs, or those learning outcomes, those are crucial pieces as well, but we will talk about that in a separate discussion. Otherwise, this video would be really long. So we're just going to limit it to assessment, feedback, and achievement. So first off, we're going to start with assessment. So there are 3 different types of assessment that we're going to be looking at today. The first is diagnostic, which asks, how can I prepare students to be successful? The second is formative, which asks, how can I give students opportunities to test and fix their understanding? And the last type of assessment we're going to talk about is summative, and that asks, how can I provide a way for students to meet a learning outcome in a literal sense? So you may be asking yourself, why are we even talking about assessments? This seminar or this video is supposed to be about feedback. Really, it's important for us to include effective assessments in your course so you have those opportunities to give effective feedback, because your effective feedback is going to come out of an effective assessment that you give your students. So that's why we're kind of starting down at foundational level, looking at assessments first. I also wanted to note that some of the things we're going to be talking about in this video are also applicable to your face-to-face courses as well. We're definitely going to be having an online focus here, but these topics, these concepts, they're also true in the face-to-face environment. So just keep that in mind. So first off, we are going to look at diagnostic or pre-instructional assessments, which again asks, how can you prepare students to be successful? So really, this assessment is useful for you as the instructor because it helps you determine what your students know or don't know. So it helps you figure out if they have the base knowledge and skills that are needed for your class or the next topic you're going to be talking about in class. You can then, with that information, tailor discussion and updates to students' abilities and motivation. So if you know that you have certain students that they're missing this key component, this prerequisite knowledge, you can address that early on rather than identifying that further down the road. And then related to that, you can direct students to support services as needed. So if you do recognize and find that one or more of your students is lacking some foundational prerequisite information, you can direct them to different campus resources like the Academic Success Center on campus that offers free tutoring to your students. You can direct students to the Writing Center where students can receive help with their writing skills, etc. You can always refer them to different online resources as well. The different possibilities are really limitless there. It helps you also identify attitudes and or goals that your students are bringing to the table. So we really want to make the content relevant to your students. And by giving these diagnostic assessments and asking them, what do you want to get out of this class? What do you want to get out of this topic? You can then identify ways that you can connect your content with their individual interests. So that is an overview of diagnostic assessment. Next, we're going to talk about formative assessment. So formative assessment asks, how can you give students opportunities to test and fix their understanding? So really, when you have a face-to-face course, this happens usually organically without you really thinking about it through class discussion and activities, where you're giving students opportunities to test out what they know. Now, we have to build in these formative assessments intentionally in an online course. So it's not impossible to have formative assessments. I don't want for you to think that. But we just have to be really intentional about it as you are creating your online course. And formative assessments, they are also known as assessments for learning. So the purpose of the assessment is to help students learn the content. They promote self-efficacy, so students feel like that they are in control and that they have the ability to be successful in your course, which then increases motivation and hope. So students feel like that they can be successful if they're willing to put the work in. This is especially critical for online courses. So with an online course, students are typically navigating through the material independently, and it's really important as they are going through that process that they know where they stand in your class. They know if they know the concepts or if they need to review the information. So it's really important to have many opportunities for formative assessment throughout your online course so students can gauge how well they know the material. Do they need to go back and review anything? And really having these assessments throughout your entire course so it's not trying to play catch up at the midterm or the final when they realize they don't understand something from earlier in the semester. So some benefits of formative assessments. First, helping the students determine what they do and do not understand. Second, providing immediate feedback to learners as far as their status in the course, what they're understanding and what they're not. It also provides you as the instructor with feedback about where learners are having difficulty so that immediate interventions can be implemented. So it helps you define and find early on those instances where students are not understanding the material. Maybe they have a misconception that you need to correct, and you can find that at a much faster rate rather than having only chapter exams, midterm final, where at that point it's really too late to intervene. And it also increases learner satisfaction. Overall, your online students, they're looking for that feedback and it's really important to them. So by having those opportunities for feedback throughout your course, your students are going to be more satisfied with their overall experience. So my question for you, what types of formative assessments are you currently using in your courses and have they proven to be successful? So if you want to share those down in the comment section below, I think that would be great. Get that conversation going. And moving on. So here are some examples of formative assessments. So like I said before, you really have to be intentional with adding formative assessments to your course. It's not impossible, we just have to be intentional about it within the online learning environment. So we're trying to add these moments where students can assess what they know and what they don't know, and also help you as the instructor know where your students stand in the class. So many of the assessments and techniques that I'm going to discuss on this slide are also applicable to your face-to-face course as well. So don't feel limited by this. You can definitely use this in either an online or a face-to-face class, because the reality is most of our face-to-face courses are rather large and it can be difficult through class discussions to really identify where each student is on their learning journey. So the first type of assessment I would like to talk about are self-check quizzes. So you can create these quizzes on Moodle. Maybe they're just simple 5, 10 question quizzes, and students can take those quizzes to assess what they know from the material and what they don't know. Now, something that I want to really emphasize here is the idea is that they are self-check. So if they are graded, they're a very minimal amount of points. Maybe students can take the quiz as many times as they want, over and over, to get a high grade. Really, with this assessment, we have to think about the purpose here. And the purpose is for them to learn the material, not for us to grade their knowledge of the material, if that makes sense. So I would encourage you, if you decide to go this route, I think it's great. I would just either have it be worth a nominal amount of points or give students the opportunity to take the quiz as many times as they would like so they can get a high score. Because the idea here is that we're going to have low stakes. So students, if they totally fail it, if they realize, wow, I really don't know this as well as I thought I did, it's not devastating to them. It's not going to devastate their grade. It's a safe way for them to figure out what they know and what they don't know. The next would be a reading question and answer forum or discussion. So you could have a forum set up for maybe the weekly readings for your class where students can go on. If they have any questions, they can ask them there, and other students or the instructor could respond to those questions. If you really want to get your students involved, what I would encourage you to do is maybe have your students that answer someone else's question, give them 1 point of extra credit. Something that's nominal, that's not really going to impact their grade that significantly, but just rewards them for their contribution. Another option would be having journals and reflections so students can reflect on their learning. And then also assignment interim deadlines with self-assessment. So for example, if you have a big project or a research paper for your class, break that project down into several different components with due dates throughout the entire semester. And at that point, students can then submit their work in small pieces and also self-assess how they're doing on the project overall. Do they need to work on better time management? Are they confused about what an academic source really looks like, etc.? Another formative assessment would be having students summarize the previous lesson. So you can have students take turns, maybe in a forum, summarizing what was learned last week. Also, classroom assessment techniques, which are also known as CATs. There are many of them, and I'm actually going to have a handout with additional formative assessments. I'll have a link to that handout down in the description box of this video, so you can check that out to view more in-depth descriptions of all of these assessments and additional ones as well. So I also have a quick tip for formative assessments. You can provide links to additional resources to reduce the number of questions that students ask you, the instructor. So for example, if you have one of those self-check quizzes, you can have it set so that if a student answers it incorrectly, it'll give them a little blurb with a description of where to go to understand why the correct answer is correct. So it could be a link to a website, a journal article. It could simply be a reference to their textbook where they need to go back and review. And this just helps you as the instructor not have to field a bunch of questions that are likely going to be the same. So just something to consider to help save time. And the last type of assessment we're going to go over are summative assessments, which ask, how can I provide a way for students to meet a learning outcome in a literal sense? So summative assessments, these are the typical assessments that we all think of, exams, papers, projects, etc. And I read an article where the author described a formative assessment, an assessment for learning, as an annual checkup, whereas a summative assessment is an autopsy. So, for example, you're thinking with an autopsy, if the mortician says, wow, this person, they really had high cholesterol, they should have been reducing the amount of bacon they were eating. Well, wouldn't that have been nice for the person to figure that out at an annual checkup instead of an autopsy? What's done is done at the point of a summative assessment. Really, there isn't time for the student to go back and reread, relearn the material. It's just capturing their proof of learning, of what do they know right now, and then you're going to be moving on in the course. So the purpose is that it is proof of learning. It's used for measuring aptitude in the learning outcome. So typically for your course, you're going to have those course learning outcomes, and a summative assessment is proof of the student meeting that outcome, and to what degree do they meet that outcome. It occurs after learning has taken place. So a formative assessment is an assessment for learning that occurs during the learning process. A summative assessment occurs at the very end after learning has taken place, and you're simply looking for proof of what students have learned up to this point. Okay, so those are the types of assessment that we're going to go over today. And next we're going to look at feedback. So now that we know what types of assessments we would want to add to your online course, we can identify appropriate ways of giving students feedback. So first we need to define feedback. And feedback is defined as communication between the instructor and student regarding their progress toward meeting the learning outcomes and objectives, which I think most of us would agree with that definition. More specifically, feedback helps the students answer what should they do with their time? How should they feel about their efforts? Do they need to put more time into this class? Are they meeting your expectations? It also lets them know, is my level of motivation appropriate? So by giving students feedback, they can identify if they need to spend more time on this course. If they're procrastinating, they can identify those behaviors early on and correct that. They also know, am I meeting my instructor's expectations? Because students, they want to meet your expectations. They want to be successful. I believe that every student that comes into your class, they have an attitude of wanting to be successful. Every student wants to pass your course, and they want to do what it takes to meet your expectations. They can do that. So some functions of feedback. First, they provide a statement of performance and rationale that explains how and why the assessor came to this conclusion. And secondly, it provides advice or suggestions for how a better response could have been prepared. So here I included a picture of a coach showing a player how he should be swinging the bat during baseball. So this is really kind of the mentality that we as instructors have to have towards our students, where we aren't just giving them the material, we're also coaching them. We're identifying areas that they are excelling and areas where they need to improve. So some benefits of feedback. First of all, it fosters interpersonal connections between the instructor and students. And this is especially critical for an online course where you're not having that typical face-to-face time interaction. This is really the main means of communication between you and your individual students. Second, it helps develop cognitive understanding and motivation. And it also helps students become independent learners because they're able to monitor, evaluate, and regulate their own learning. And lastly, it is desired by college students, millennials, and Generation Y especially. They are looking for that feedback. So formative feedback. Formative feedback is like a good murder mystery. You have to have three things. You have to have motive, opportunity, and means. So we're going to dive into those. So first off, motive. First, the student needs it. Obviously, the student is not going to accept your feedback if they feel like they don't need it. The second is that it is targeted and aligned with the learning outcomes. Also, I would encourage you to start with a positive message. So if your feedback is 100% negative, your students are going to be really turned off by that and they're going to be less likely to use it. Now, I'm not saying that everything you say has to be glowing and positive. Students need to know what they need to work on. But if you can start with something positive, even if it's something like you turned it in on time, you used the right formatting, you probably can find something good to say about their work. So if you start with a positive message, it just in general makes your feedback more impactful. It also helps students see the connections between the course and their lives. So like I said earlier, we want to try to identify those connections between the student, their attitude, their goals, and your course and your content, just to make the course more relevant for them. So next, looking at opportunity. We need to provide frequent and consistent opportunities for feedback. So the main keywords I want to emphasize here are frequent and consistent. So you can give great feedback on those big assignments, and that's wonderful, but you really need to have frequent and consistent feedback with your students. So you're checking in with them regularly, letting them know how they're doing, and letting them know if they need to make any modifications or adjustments. This reduces pressure and anxiety. It also increases engagement, which is especially crucial for online courses. So feedback, again, is a main means of communication between you, the instructor, and the student. So providing those opportunities frequently and consistently is crucial. Also, be timely. Give feedback at the beginning of the semester to set students at ease and increase their motivation. So if you can give them some sort of feedback during that first week of class, that's going to make it just a really good impression on your students first and foremost, and it's also going to help set the tone for the rest of the course. So students know that you are a responsive instructor. They're not just going to be left out hanging to figure things out on their own, that you're there and you're there to help. Also, give enough time your students to benefit from and use your feedback. So an example of this would be, let's say if you have 4 essays for your class, and by the time you give the feedback for essay 1 back to your students have already submitted essay number 2. Now your feedback is not going to be as helpful because students probably made the same mistakes that they did on the second essay as they did the first. So just keeping that in mind. Lastly, we're going to talk about means. So we need to consider your course format. What works in your face-to-face course may or may not work for the online environment and may need to be adjusted. Also, consider various formats. You can use rubrics, electronic annotation where you're making comments on your students' papers. You can also use audio feedback. Be creative. You don't have to simply use one means of feedback. Find something that works for you and for your students and run with it. Also, a key here is student has to be able and willing to use your feedback, and that's what we're going to dive into next. How do we make sure that our feedback is effective for our students? So some challenges students face when using feedback. First, they see their work as what was submitted and as what they had intended it to be. So students, they're working on their paper, they submit it to you, you leave your feedback and submit it back to them. When they're reviewing your feedback, they're reviewing it through the lens of what they turned in and also what they had wanted to say. So if you make a comment on there of, oh, I wish you would have included such and such source, they're thinking in their mind, oh, I tried to, but XYZ. So just keeping that in mind. Also, the student may not have the prerequisite knowledge to understand your feedback. So if they don't have that prerequisite knowledge that you would identify through that diagnostic assessment, they may not even understand what you're saying in your feedback. So it's not really going to be helpful to them. And lastly, the student doesn't have the tacit knowledge to interpret the instructor's feedback. So an example of this would be between paragraphs 1 and 2, writing the word flow with an arrow. Now, most of us that have proofread a lot of papers would know, okay, that means that there are problems with the flow between paragraph 1 and 2. I probably need to look at the last sentence or two of that first paragraph and compare it with the first sentences of the second paragraph and make sure that there's a connection between those two paragraphs. Now, that's a lot of explanation to get out of one word on a paper. And if a student isn't used to that, they're going to look at the word flow and be thinking, I don't know what this means. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. So how do we make giving feedback feasible? So how do we overcome these challenges that students face and give them effective feedback? But also, how do we make it feasible? Because the reality is there are only so many hours in a day. And you as an instructor, you have many demands on your time. So the goal here is working smarter, not harder. So the goal isn't to improve feedback by spending more time on it. Rather, the goal is to optimize the time spent on feedback so that you as the instructor can invest an appropriate amount of effort and get high quality results. So now for this next component of this video, we're going to talk about how we can work smarter and not harder when it comes to giving feedback to your students. So I'm going to first give you 3 strategies to improve efficiency when giving feedback. The first is time management. Are you spending too much time giving feedback on low impact activities? I want for you to think about your time and your time to give feedback as a biggest bang for your buck. Where are you going to get the biggest bang for your buck? Is it by responding to every single forum post that's in the forums? Maybe not, depending on your course and how your assessments and outcomes are going to be measured. So really look for those big impact activities. Invest your time there. Now I would say, I know I mentioned the forums. It's important to obviously read the forums and maybe just respond to 1 or 2 students on the forum instead of every single student. You just have to find ways to find a balance where you're getting the biggest bang for your buck with your time. The second is utilizing technology. Utilize tools to increase efficiency without diminishing quality. And we're going to talk about some of these tools on the next slide. Third is a holistic feedback approach. Weave elements of feedback throughout your entire course and don't limit it just to the assignments. If you really have this attitude and mentality of feedback throughout the entire course, it's going to make your amount of time required decrease. You really want to have just this feedback mentality woven throughout your entire class. And one way we can do that is with frequent low stakes grading, which I'm going to talk about later on in this presentation. Okay, so looking at some of those tech tools that we can use for giving feedback. These are just a few of the tools. There are so many other options out there as well, but I just don't have time to cover everything. So first is Rubistar, which is a free online rubric builder. So you can start from one of their templates or you can create your own rubric entirely online. The second is the Moodle Assignment Grader. So with the Assignment Grader, you can annotate and make comments on your students' papers and submissions electronically. The third option is the Turnitin Grader. This is also found on Moodle. You have those originality and plagiarism checking options, but Turnitin also has a great interface for grading your students' assignments. So they have options for leaving comments. You can also record video or audio comments, You can record audio comments on a Turnitin assignment. You can also use Google Docs, which is great for annotating, collaborating, and sharing documents with your students. You can give group feedback via the announcements forum. So I don't want for you to think that feedback is limited to this really in-depth feedback that you give on individual assignments. You can simply give group feedback like, great job guys, I was so impressed by your forum post last week, etc. Or you could maybe give another form of feedback It's just letting students know, hey, I read through the forums and I noticed that many of you are misunderstanding this concept. Why don't you go ahead and check out this article and maybe that will help clarify things, and so on. Another option is Edpuzzle. So with Edpuzzle, you can add questions to different videos. So you can find a video on YouTube that you want to share with your students, and then with Edpuzzle, you can add questions to the video. So let's say if you have a 10-minute video, you can insert a question at the 2-minute mark. So students need to answer that question before they move on. So this helps make sure that your students are understanding the content of the video and they're not just watching it, they're understanding what they're watching. Another option for an in-class or a face-to-face course is the use of Kahoot or Poll Everywhere. So Kahoot is an in-class quizzing game, so you can set up these different multiple choice questions and have your students use their cell phones to answer the questions, and it keeps track of points, and it just makes it really fun and engaging. You can also use Poll Everywhere just to simply poll your course and see their responses to a question or a prompt. Another option is Pear Deck. So with Pear Deck, you can add questions and activities to your presentation slides. So instead of giving students a 30-slide PowerPoint presentation to click through, you can give them a Pear Deck presentation, which will have the content of those slides as well as different questions and activities throughout the presentation, so you can make sure that your students are understanding what they're reading and what they're taking in. Another option is screencasting videos to give feedback on essays. So Ron Martinez, he started using this in one of his courses where he goes ahead and he records his computer screen with audio while he is going through and grading students' papers. And he's found this to be a great time-saving way to give students feedback. I also like this option because if you are teaching an online course, it gives a personal touch to your class where students are hearing your voice. They feel like they're getting to know you as the instructor, and it's not just some some random person sending them written feedback. They really get to know you as the instructor. So I'm going to leave a link to one of his videos down in the description box so you can see what this looks like. And if you want to, you could use things like screencasting, Google Hangouts to record those sorts of videos. So my question for you, are there any additional tools that you're using to give students feedback? If you are, please share those tools down in the comment section so that we can all learn together. So next, I want to talk with you about frequent low stakes grading. So this is a way that we can weave elements of feedback throughout your course. So frequent low stakes grading, it provides students with mini grades so that any individual grade doesn't have great weight. So if a student totally fails one of these assessments because they just don't understand the content, it's not going to be devastating to them. It's really low stakes where they still feel like even if they totally failed one of these assessments, there's still hope for them. They can still learn the material and do just fine in your class. So it provides students with many opportunities for feedback. It's especially useful for online courses because students are navigating through the material independently most of the time. We want to make sure that we have these low stakes opportunities for them to figure out if they know the content well, if there are areas they need to review, etc. So some advantages to frequent low stakes grading. First off, it creates dialogue between you and the student. It answers how am I doing? And it gives you, the instructor, an opportunity to clarify content as needed. So especially with an online course, we're looking for as many opportunities as possible to build in communication and feedback, and this is one way we can do that. It also builds confidence, so students have many opportunities to succeed. So even if a student doesn't do well on one of the assessments, they can always take another assessment and overall their grade for the course will be just fine. It also increases motivation. So it helps students overcome procrastination as they don't have the delayed reward of receiving a grade at the end of the course. They are given upfront, this is what you know, this is what you don't know, and it's not pushed back until they receive that final grade at the very end of the class. So some different activities that you could use would first off be frequent, short, informal writing assignments. So this could be a learning journal, they could be forum posts, reflections to encourage metacognition. So really making students aware of their own process of learning. Second, using rubrics in your course. It really demystifies evaluation for them. They know upfront what your standards are, what your expectations are, and what are the benchmarks they need to meet for your class. Another thing I've heard of that you might want to consider is having students actually contribute to the creation of the rubric. So they're more invested in that rubric and those different areas of assessment. So that's something you can also consider. Also, quizzes, low stakes quizzes here. And you can use Moodle to alleviate time constraints. So don't feel like, oh, I'm going to have to grade all these quizzes. Set up Moodle so that Moodle will grade those quizzes for you. Now, a key here, again, I want to emphasize are that these are low stakes. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to make these quizzes to evaluate students after they have read a chapter and they just got to take the quiz one time, that's really not frequent low stakes grading. Frequent low stakes grading would be, oh, have this self-check quiz, you can take it multiple times, or something along those lines. Another way that you can give students feedback is through peer review. Now, there are several advantages for peer review. First off, it alleviates time constraints. So you're sharing the burden of feedback with your students. So students have the opportunity to give their peers feedback. Second, it allows students to receive more feedback, so they have a greater quantity, more perspectives. It also provides opportunities for engagement. So when you're in an online course, it's pretty easy to feel isolated, where you feel like you're just off, you're in your own little bubble by yourself with your laptop, working through this class, and you hear from the instructor every now and then. With peer review, you're really connecting your students to each other, so it feels like that they're engaged with one another. They're getting to know one another. And then this will build a learning community, which is really the goal with an online course. We don't want for students to feel isolated. We want for them to have that experience of a learning community. So you may have used peer review in the past and you may have found it to be rather a challenge. So there are some reasons why students may struggle with peer review. First off, students are new to the concepts and theories, so they don't know what to say or exactly how to say it. As they're kind of all at the same even playing field with these new concepts, they may not feel that they have the knowledge or the authority to really speak into these new concepts and theories and potentially correct their peers. They also may not want to hurt someone else's feelings. And they may be terrified about what others may say about their work, so they don't say anything about anyone else's. So this is where students develop kind of this unspoken code about peer review, where no one says anything negative about anyone else's, and no one will say anything negative about yours. Another challenge would be some may not care or have an opinion when they're peer reviewing someone else's work. So next we're going to talk about how we can overcome these challenges. And that would be by revitalizing peer review. So first off, have a candid discussion about peer review with your students. Lay out what your expectations are. Let them know what constructive feedback looks like, because this may be the first chance they have of ever reviewing someone else's work and they don't know where to start. Also, emphasize the broad range of peer review. Sometimes with peer review, students can just get stuck looking at grammatical errors. So they're really proofreading a paper, they're not reviewing it. So emphasize with your students what the difference is between proofreading and peer review. And that it's beyond grammar, it's helping the writer find new ideas, confirm the validity of their argument, etc. Also, increase accountability through grading. So with peer review, what I would do is have a component of their assignment grade before giving a peer review. And also model the feedback practices that you would like for your students to demonstrate. So with peer review, since we don't want it to just be about grammar, we need to be sure to give our students very clear guidelines of what peer review should look like. So there are 4 tasks of peer appraisal that you could potentially use for your class. So first off, asking the reviewer to answer, does a particular response qualify as an attempt to address the issue specified in the task description? Also answering how well does the work achieve the purpose intended? What are the grounds for the judgment reached using whatever criteria are appropriate to substantiating the calculation? You may need to break that one down a little bit. And then how could the work be substantially improved? So give students some guiding questions as they're reviewing someone else's work. If you simply just hand someone a paper and say, review this, they may not know what exactly to look for or what to do with it. So which of these strategies or methods could you potentially see yourself using in your courses? Do you have any additional strategies that you would like to share? Feel free to share those down in the comments below. So now we've talked about assessment and feedback, we're going to talk about our last component, which is achievement. So really, this component is about answering the question, I gave my students feedback, now what? I spent all of this time giving students this great effective feedback. How do I make sure that my students are actually going to use my feedback in the future? So post-feedback. First off, I would encourage you to have growth-oriented feedback. Give 3 to 4 specific suggestions of what students can do next time to improve their work. Also, another great way to close the loop with feedback is to have students submit an action plan to you. Have students submit an action plan as a result of your feedback. Have them answer the question, how are they going to improve? Whether this means they need to work on time management, they need to work on not procrastinating, or if they need to work on their writing skills by going to the writing center, or reviewing APA, MLA, Chicago style formatting guidelines. Have students reflect on your feedback and submit some sort of action plan or follow-up to you. This really encourages metacognition, letting students evaluate their own learning process. And then you can also follow up with support and resources as needed. So now we've gone over these components, and really ideally they're all supposed to be working together in perfect alignment so our students can be successful and you can have a successful online course. So just quickly recapping what we discussed in this video today. First off, identifying 3 types of assessment. So again, we have our diagnostic, formative, and summative assessment. And it's really crucial to include all 3 types of assessment in your online course so you have those opportunities to give your students effective feedback. Second, we define feedback and its function within the learning environment. It's a crucial communication piece between you and your students. Also, understanding why giving feedback is important for student success. It helps students understand what they know and what they don't know, identifying areas of improvement. We also explored some different ways that we can give students feedback. Again, looking at those tech tools, the different types of assessment that you can use throughout your course. And these are all of my references for today's video or seminar. And that's it. So I thank you all for joining us today, for hanging in there with me throughout this video. If you do have any questions about feedback, about online pedagogy, please contact Celt. I'd be happy to help you and answer any questions that you have. So thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day.